We are back. Giants Baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and one of the co-hosts, they come and go, we come and go, the show comes and goes, Ian Kahanowitz. How are you?
Me? I'm doing fantastic, baseball.
You always do fantastic because you got a great mind and your passion is baseball. And with that, how could you go wrong?
That's right. You can't go wrong.
All right. Hey, I got to say, we're talking off the air. The most interesting topic in the world to me these days is the power of the major league unions. Unbelievable power. I think what with Reagan's job on the air traffic controllers and what have you, this is the strongest union in the country. What say you about that? You're an attorney. You talk to a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of baseball people who are involved in it. And you mentioned something to me before. You were talking to the umpires union. And what's going on? What are you doing constructively to help these people?
Well, what's going on is that the only unions that are in baseball are for the major leagues, and that includes both the umpires union and also, the Major League Baseball players. Now, again, under the leadership of Bud Selig, in 1999, the umpires posed to walk out and resign because they were not getting their share of benefits as well as increases in pay. And so what basically Bud Selig did was call the umpires union bluff. Okay? And so he called the bluff saying, okay, you want to resign? That's fine. But what I'm going to do is, if I give you one chance to open the door, okay, one chance. If you do not have a signed statement to me by Tuesday that you are coming back and going to do your job on the baseball diamond, you will be forever banned from working in the major leagues. Now, all the umpires did that, but a majority of them recently, because they lost their faith in the leader, because the leader's like, well, Bud Selig's going to, knuckle under, and they all came back to work on that Tuesday, saying we're sorry, but a lot of them had, and a lot of people don't know this, a lot of them who, gave back their notice saying we're coming back, Selig had them wormed out of the league, mainly Al Clark, who I spent some time at his house in Williamsburg 2 years ago. After 26 years, he was forced to step down on a technicality. Now, people like Jim Evans, who was a great baseball umpire and who had umpire camps over the years, and he's into more marketing gears, and now he didn't come back. And he didn't call. He gave up his job as an umpire because he was so adamant against the bureaucracy of Selig and his major league, cronies. You're hopping back to a time of the dead ball period where owners were just as corrupt. So unions, especially for umpires, and unions for Major League Baseball players, very important. Now, there has been a group of players that have not reaped the benefits of any, pension plans or health care plans who played in the major leagues prior to 1980. And these folks, when the arbitration agreements came up, and when Marvin Miller and the Players Association sat down to hammer out an agreement, they mistook something. There was an oversight. The language did not read that any player before 1980 was entitled to health benefits or was entitled to a pension plan. After 1980, if you sat on the bench one day, you were entitled to health benefits for the rest of your life, and if you played 43 days, you get a lifelong pension. These guys sweated it out for years, and a lot of them, and I'll give you an example. Jimmy Driscoll. I speak to Jimmy once a week. He played for both the Oakland A's, the Swinging A's. Nancy Finley's on your co-host. He played for Texas under Ted Williams. And he didn't make the 43-day period, in his 10-year career. He was up and down from the minors and all this. And they had this little deal that came in 2012 whereby they felt bad, Major League Baseball, and they gave Jimmy like $1,000 or something. You know what was the first thing Jimmy did? He fixed his heater in his house because he didn't have the money to fix the heater.
Incredible. Now, I had the same conversation with Carmen Fanzoni, who runs the Chicago Cubs fantasy teams. You go to a fantasy league where you wear a Cub uniform, this, that, and the other thing. But my point is he fell just short of the pension and of pension benefits. Back in the day when you did really have to work for it, it was 43 days, incredible. Things are changing. It's the most powerful union in the world. Now, I think that the union and management in baseball work hand in hand. They're buddies. The union leaders are in bed with Major League Baseball, and they combine to make each other rich. Is this good? Is this bad? Should there be more contention between the two? What do you think?
Tony Clark, who played for the Detroit Tigers, first base for a long time, is the union rep. And a lot of these guys have made phone calls to Clark and petitioned Clark and sent emails and mail, and nothing has been done for them to get instated, to get pension plans and health care. And these guys are in their 70s, Ralph, they're about your age. They've gotten to the point.
Thank you for reminding me, Ian. I hadn't thought about my mortality for almost an hour now. So,
but hey, you're going to live to 140, Ralph. It's the.
Do not threaten me, young man. You can't do that to me.
But let me tell you, this is what goes on, and I'm going to tell you right now, Tony Clark hasn't done anything for this one particular item. Now, what people don't know is, in 1997, on the historic 50th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking into the majors, Major League Baseball gave all the ex-historical Negro League players health care and a baseball pension. Okay? Now, this is very important, and I want you to follow this. They didn't play 43 days in Major League Baseball. They didn't play in Major League Baseball at all. And so these players were livid. They were in their early 50s, late 40s, like I am now, livid. So they took Major League Baseball to court, saying that this is definitely discrimination. You're giving players who are black, who didn't even play for Major League Baseball, something that we've been trying to fight for 17 years, since 1980, since the whole arbitration went up in flames, and we couldn't get it. And you know what Major League Baseball came back with and went on the case? It wasn't a pension. It was a charity. And we wrote it off as a charitable deduction to give those players and their families the health care and the benefits that they rightly deserved, but they didn't because they were excluded. And the constitutional attorneys that were for the players, I don't even know what the hell they were thinking, because there was black players who played in the major leagues, not for 43 days, who were, as part of that class action suit. It was so ludicrous and so negligible by the players' attorneys that when I read the case, I almost threw up. I thought I could do a better job than this. So baseball got away with it by saying, no, it's not a pension. It's a charitable thing we did. We felt bad. Okay? It's almost like the affirmative action programs of the 70s. We know we messed up the American government, but here is our condolences. We're sorry. Baseball players lost out.
That's very heady. Where do you think it's going in the future, in the near future, and in the distant future?
You know who's a good person to ask that question, and I'm going to have him back on my show, and I love him, even though he's a Trumpite, and I don't mix that. Brett Boone, because his father was one of the people who actually helped Marvin Miller during those days of trying to, get the reserve clause dismissed, and of course later on with the players' strike in 1981, and then Brett was heavily involved in the union. So I don't see it going anywhere. As long as Tony Clark is there and he's not doing what needs to be done, baseball is going to continue to make a boatload of money, Ralph. And if you compare the salaries, there's been inflation. Let's say, hey, Bud Selig became the commissioner in '92, right after they got rid of Fay Vincent because he wasn't a slave to the owners. Okay, let's just say that since Bud Selig came in, the average player was making $3 to $5 million, back then. Now they're making, I don't know, $10, $11, $12 million a year, and half of them don't even deserve it. But
that comparison wanes by comparing the guys who played in the 50s and 60s, what they're making. What Joe DiMaggio, you were the one who said the other day that quoted Joe as saying, they asked him, how would you negotiate with an owner today? And this is back 15, 20 years ago. And he says, well, I'd start out by coming into his office and saying, hello, partner.
That's it, yeah. And you know something? You bring up a good point with Joe DiMaggio, and that's going to get us into California baseball because, of course, he was part of the Pacific. But I want to say something about Joe, okay?
Yeah.
This is what I want to say about Joe. In his sophomore year as a Yankee, this is 37, I think, he was complaining about his salary. And again, we got the reserve clause in place, You don't like what management's giving? Too damn bad. Go sit out for a year. Okay? We're not going to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe fought the management. It was one of the first biggest player management arguments since the dead ball era. The Roaring 20s brought in, Roost didn't really need to pay for Major League Baseball considering the publicity and the commercials he was doing on the outside. And, for the most part, these guys made a meager salary and had to have a winter job. Yogi Berra, well into the 50s, was an usher at an Italian restaurant in his hometown of St. Louis. Rizzuto and him ended up going partners into a bowling alley.
And they sold clothing. They fitted and sold clothing together, Rizzuto and Berra, before the bowling alley. They worked. They went to work in a clothing store, and people would come in, give me a 32 regular or whatever the hell the size of 38 regular, and that's what they did. There was a book written, I think it was by Fay Vincent or one of the other Giamatti. It was probably Giamatti. It was We'd Play the Game for Nothing. And it rang nostalgic about the 50s, the guys who played the Robin Roberts, all these guys saying hell, salary. It was a bunch of hooey. The book was the title of the book was hooey because those players were so heavily involved with trying to break that reserve clause long before Curt Flood. They fought that thing all the way. They wanted unions. They couldn't get from here to there because baseball has a certain something. What's it called? The reserve clause? Not
the reserve clause.
Antitrust laws. Explain that. I know they benefit, and they're so afraid of losing that privilege that they stand in front of Congress and say, we're sorry, we're not doing well. Huh. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Huh? Congress is United States Congress, who is brought to you by the NRA, for instance, judges baseball. It's come to that. Why has it come to that? Because the threat of losing that antitrust deal that they have runs so rampant. How did that get started, Ian? You're an attorney. And what would happen if they lost the antitrust? Would it kill the biz itself? It wouldn't kill baseball. It would reform. They'd have leagues. We'd always have players. We'd always have something. But would it kill it as we know it? Ian Kahanowitz.
Well, this is what happened, Ralph. And we got to go back to the dead ball era, okay? The dead ball era produced what was called the third league. It was called the Federal League.
The Federal League, right?
Now, again, look at the time period, 1913.
Ian, we spoke over each other. What was the league called?
Federal League of Baseball.
Yes, okay. I said that too. So, okay, we're correct. Sorry.
Now, what happened was that they were going to challenge Major League Baseball, both the American League with Van Johnson and the National League. Landis wasn't commissioner yet. In fact, there was a committee of three that the National Committee that oversaw baseball, and Johnson was one of it. And I'm doing my research right now, and I'm starting to write the book on the Tyko-Speaker affair. And it's getting really detailed that, the book's going to be longer, and there's so much more politics than I even knew. And one of the things that came up is the antitrust stuff. Now, Landis was a district court judge, and the case actually came to him in 1916 after the Federal League had died. But what the Federal League was doing was taking baseball players away from Major League Baseball. Why? Because they were paying them bigger salaries. All these big moguls of the baseball diamonds, the owners, they paid their workers pennies. It was no different than the guy working in the factory. But here we go. The Federal League is taken away, and basically what they're doing is they're saying we don't have a reserve clause. Baseball players can name their price. Well, you're infringing on Major League Baseball. So now what does Major League Baseball have to do? Got to raise their prices. And so they do, but they kept the reserve clause in effect. Now, it got to Landis's desk. Landis ruled that antitrust doesn't apply to baseball. Now, he went to the Supreme Court 6 years later in Federal Baseball Club of Baltimore, because it was the Baltimore team that sued the National League, in which the Supreme Court held, and you have to understand at the time in the 1920s, Warren G. Harding was president. We tried to get back to a sense of normalcy after World War I. A more conservative nature was coming, and the court, who was led at the time by ex-President William Howard Taft, who was the only person to ever be president and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, ruled that federal antitrust laws did not apply to baseball because these laws only governed interstate commerce, and baseball was not a form of interstate commerce, which is a bunch of bunk.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, the issue returned to the Supreme Court in 1953, and of course in 72 with Curt Flood. Now, again, in 53, you still got, you got the Roosevelt Court, a very liberal court, and of course you got Earl Warren, who became Chief Justice when Justice Vincent had died. But both times, and that Flood lost his case, the court declined to overrule the Federal Baseball Club, even though the conventional professional understanding of interstate commerce has expanded dramatically since that case. But The court never overruled it, and it still stands almost 100 years today. A very outdated opinion that is still good law.
Why does it stand?
I think it stands because the court don't want to touch it. They feel that they don't want to legislate. The court, when they don't want to make a decision, always say, well, this is Congress's. Congress has the power to amend the antitrust laws to treat sports equally. If Congress wanted to do it, they would have done it. They ignore it.
Okay. Ian, what would be the ramifications of baseball losing the antitrust?
Well, you'd have to look into other sports, Ralph, and see what what happened there. In two cases from the 1950s, one involving boxing and the other football, the court said, hey, you know something? Antitrust laws do apply to football and boxing. And you say, well, wait a minute, Ian. It applies to two different sports. Why not for baseball? And you know what the court said? This is what the court said, Ralph, and it's going to piss you off. The exemption's only for baseball. That's the national pastime. Well, baseball is not the national pastime anymore. 60, almost 70 years later, is it? So what's going on?
Porn is the natural pastime.
Hey, you know something, and now it's free. And you know something, all the porn studios have many, many lawsuits against the free porn, like YouPorn and all these other RedTube and all this. I read the cases. I don't go to the porn sites because my wife will kill me.
Oh, well, it'll be peace at last then.
But you know, I mean, it applies. Now, getting back to DiMaggio, okay, and linking this to Giants baseball, we go back to a time where, hey, DiMaggio was.
I've been thinking you can't link DiMaggio to Giants baseball. You could link him to A's baseball, but you can't to Giants baseball. So what I will do, I will make a total change in what we're talking about and bring the Giants into it. One of the guys that was most affected by that I grew up watching by having no union back in the day when he came in, when he spent 4 years in the Yankee minor league system playing a first baseman, playing behind Lou Gehrig. Now, how far this guy played a billion games in a row. He never missed a game, let alone, you're not going to advance. And I was granted an interview back in the 90s by Hank Sauer. Now, Hank Sauer was an original San Francisco Giant and played on the last New York Giant baseball team. And if you look at all the pictures of the parade they gave the Giants when they came to San Francisco, and there's Willie Mays in a car in a convertible, next to him is Hank Sauer. And Hank Sauer spent an entire career entire life in baseball, 50 years in baseball. Now, when it came time at the end when Spec Richardson took over the Giants, Hank was a scout. He had been a terrific batting coach, minor league batting coach, guru. Everybody loved Hank, and Hank was a major league scout in the day when Spec Richardson took over. And I come across last week the interview I did with Hank, only half of which I had ever published anywhere. It's on YouTube. Half of it was on YouTube. I came across the full interview, which absolutely blew me away, where he told the story of how after 30 years of being a San Francisco Giant, first a New York Giant, at the end then a San Francisco Giant, serving them in every capacity. Hank said, because I asked him the question, I said, after all these years, do you consider yourself a Giant or a Cub because he was so incredibly popular in Wrigley Field. And this is going to bring it all together. He had tears in his eyes. And then he told me the story. He says, I think you can consider me a Cub because they didn't even have the courtesy, Speck Richardson didn't, of calling the man into his office. He had what Hank said, he sent the shoeshine boy to fire me. I think it was Gary Nelson, who was indeed a shoeshine boy. He had nothing, one of the least competent baseball executives the Giants ever had. And he was at the time an assistant under Speck Richardson. And he went out and told Hank, you're fired. After all those years, didn't even have the courtesy, did the general manager, who was appointed by baseball, by the way, and Speck Richardson was a racist to go along with that, but that's for another story. But that's all because no unions. The players had a union, but the people working for the ex-players, the scouts, the trainers, all of those guys don't have a union. And I can give you the story. Carl Hubble, the greatest ex-pitcher Giants ever had, Christy Mathewson, you could say, Carl Hubble, Marichal, right up there. He basically lived in a little apartment in Arizona, no pension, died absolutely broke. It's a disgrace, absolutely a disgrace. So until there's some sort of socialistic program in baseball that meets with not only the players that are vested, but has to give some credence to the guys who played in the minors for all those years and never got called up, never had any pension benefit whatsoever. So that's my ranting on the situation. It's always the rich that get richer, and it's always the working people. And say what you want. You could be a working person for $1 million a year. You're still a working person. And they still have you. So, sorry for my ranting, Ian. Am I on the right track, or do I sound like some sort of maniacal old geese that sees things as they should be and will always be frustrated?
Well, I'll tell you, you are on the right track.
Or a little bit of both. It could be both, Ian. Tell me the truth. Be honest, be frank.
You are on the right thing, because I want to say a little bit about Sauer for those who don't know about him. He was a two-time All-Star. He was a great slugger in his day for the Cubs in the early 50s. He hit over 30 home runs for 6 seasons with a career-high 41 in 54. His most productive season came in 1952 when he led the National League in home runs with 37, 121 RBIs, and was named Most Valuable Player. Now, when the Cubs were awful, and this is before Ernie Banks and the rest started to filter in, Sauer provided some joy for the team's fans with the power hit, and that they called him the mayor of Wrigley Field. Now, this is something interesting that people might not know. He was well known for using smokeless tobacco, and it was often
right. The fans would would throw cans of tobacco out to him, and what screwed it up for Ralph Kiner when he came over from the Pirates, they put him in the outfield, and they throw cans of tobacco at Ralph Kiner, and he'd throw them back.
Yeah,
he didn't understand. He didn't understand the tradition. They were trying to love him, and after that they never took to him. But yes, Hank Sauer was very special in Chicago, and everybody I've talked to over the years doing this Giant show that had any dealings with Hank thought he was beloved. And within the next few weeks, I'm going to find a way of publishing that interview that I don't know how it became misplaced. And to be honest with you, I've moved and removed and lived in camper vans and motorhomes and had my stuff in storage. And all of a sudden, I'm going over a box of baseball cards, and the cat knocks the box over. A big old, I don't know, VCR thing falls on what do they call it? The big old things that you plug
the VCR, the Betamax?
VCR. Falls on the floor, and I pick it up. It says, Hank Sauer, interview, blah, blah, blah. And it was, I couldn't find the entire one. Like I say, I'm so excited to get this. And that brings the whole thing in to tie in it to the Giants. We were going to talk, because he was the original. He, Willie, Monsanto, and a few others. One of them, who was in the Army at the time, but an original New York Giant, was the future National League president and a great announcer, along with Phil Rizzuto, Bill White. As
right.
Rizzuto would say, he'd call him White.
That's right.
But,
and you know what's interesting, Ralph?
One of those guys who came over and was traded away to St. Louis because Cha-Cha, Orlando Cepeda, was on the horizon. And who they get, I can't remember who they got from St. Louis for Bill White. It was Sam Jones, Toothpick Sam Jones, who won 20 games in '59. And so, in a way, it was a short-term boost for the Giants. But like so many other excess outfielders, first basemen, that they traded away via Luz, Moda, they were just rich in outfielders, shy in pitching. That's what it came down to. But some great early years of the Giants in San Francisco.
And you know something, Ralph? San Francisco, and we'll get to this next time, but two things about the Giants when they moved to San Francisco. Number one, as you know, and we'll get into it, huge parade. I mean, the city embraced the Giants coming in. But on the other hand, and this is where I linked DiMaggio to the Giants, even though he was a coach on the A's in the '68 season. Well, DiMaggio played for the San Francisco Seals. Where were the Giants playing the first 2 years?
That's right, in that same stadium.
Seal Stadium. Now,
yeah,
a lot of people do not know about the Pacific Coast League. It's important. They consider it a minor league, league. It wasn't. And we'll get to that next time. I was going to get to this time because when you talk about the Giants and Major League Baseball moving west, you got to talk about the Pacific Coast League. You got to talk about Seal Stadium, and you got to take a look at who was produced out of there. You had DiMaggio, you had Williams, you had all the DiMaggio brothers.
Oh, it goes back Lefty O'Doul, Lazzari.
Yeah,
and there is a tie. How about that? We'll use that as a tie. Lefty O'Doul was a coach on those early Giant teams under Rigney. And that was a marriage not built in heaven. We'll talk about that another time. You interviewed a fellow who wrote a book on Lefty O'Doul, if I'm not mistaken.
Dennis Snelling, and he asked, just like Robert Garrett, to speak with you because they're both going to be at the Sabre meeting. I don't know how that went, but it just got put on the top 10 baseball books to read this summer, along with Jason Turbo's Oakland A's, both California baseball. Lefty O'Doul, it was such an amazing book and such an amazing interview with Dennis Snelling that he couldn't stop thanking me for doing my homework. Lefty O'Doul is probably one of the most overlooked people in American baseball, but not in Japan. Remember, MacArthur called upon Lefty O'Doul to come to Japan to help with the morale of the Japanese people after we had our folks there over there rebuilding the country, and my grandfather was one of those folks who were.
That was after Hiroshima Gate.
Right, because they laid down, and Emperor Hirohito said, "Look, we got to endure."
That was a Democratic president, by the way.
Well, yeah,
just
Truman.
Truman, yeah.
But MacArthur.
Ian, just off the subject a little, there's very little difference between, over the years, I would say now we're a little more polarized thanks to Mr. Trump. But, not thanks to Mr. Trump, thanks to the Democratic Party who made it possible. That notwithstanding, it used to be a very, very fine line between being a Democrat and a Republican. Kevin Keating, for instance, who was a senator from New York, he was a liberal Republican. You couldn't tell him from a Democrat if you stood him on his head. And things have really changed. And I don't know what to tell you, but we will talk.
I know what to tell you, and this is what I'm going to tell you. There was always a fine line between Democrats and Republicans. However, the thing that's missing today is the thing that came to light under the Eisenhower administration. Now, under Roosevelt, remember, Roosevelt's my favorite president of all time. I mean, he's just as important as Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. Washington gave us our country. Lincoln saved our country. Roosevelt brought our country out of, nothing and won a world.
Hey, Roosevelt gave us Social Security, so I don't have to sell apples and pencils.
Right. But the thing is, and he also saved baseball during the 40s when Landis wrote him, and he said, I do believe baseball should be played for the morale. But this is what I want to say. Under Eisenhower, you have to do your homework. Who was the head of the Senate at the time? Lyndon Johnson, wasn't he? He was the Senate leader. And he found a way to get, on and get along with Eisenhower. And their bipartisanship throughout the 50s and early 60s, before Kennedy became president, actually helped the country. Now, when George Bush, I think it all started in 1994 with the whole revolution when Newt Gingrich coming in. I think that's when bipartisanship really went out the window, and it wasn't seen even under the Bush administration, the Obama administration, of course, this administration. However, I am seeing some cracks where the Republicans are crossing the line saying, we're not going to vote for this health care stuff. And Trump is
of course not, because they're afraid of not being reelected and totally being tainted by Trump's craziness. What are you going to replace it with? Find something to replace it with, and then replace it before just simply eliminating it. What are you going to put people out of health care? Pre-existing conditions? That would never go down. It's just a dog and pony show. Right now, it looks like the bad guys are the Republicans. Next time, it'll look like the bad guys are the Democrats. It goes back and forth. They've got us by the short hairs, and they just play good cop, bad cop with us every 4 years, every 8 years, and it's passed on. Now they're talking about they're passing on Hillary Clinton's child. I can't remember her name. Is the front runner for the future. Under the table, that woman is gonna bring it all back. That's not it. It's the voters. It's the fact that money controls the primaries. It's the electoral college. There's so many things that are messed up. But you got to say this: the two-party system is going down the drain. I don't know how it is. I don't know if it'll be a peaceful revolution, if they're going to one day get so fed up that they're going to march on Washington and just remove him. Could happen.
Well, how about this?
We'll be here to report it, Ian, and we'll try to make it coincide with what's going on, what's really important. They say that baseball is a microcosm of life. I think it's the other way around. I think life is a microcosm of baseball. But we'll pursue that another time. I enjoy chatting with you. This has been the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Giants Baseball, past, present, future. Ian Kahanowitz, attorney, lay minister in the Catholic Church. We have to get into that and what you've been doing to make a difference on the inside. You're more than just baseball, Ian. You got things going for you. You got 2 kids. You got a philosophy of life. You're one of the few Catholics I've ever spoken to. First of all, one of the few Jews that converted to Catholicism that I ever spoke to. But you believe in pro-life. And I can't let this go. How does this affect your relationship with the Catholic Church?
Well, they don't like it, but any organized religion will tell you that their law is the law. My thing is okay. You could tell the church, look, you're not up with the times. They're going to say, wait a minute, the times. They should have never changed. It's not Bob Dylan. It's the anti-Bob Dylan. You know what I'm saying? So for them, they're gonna go into the Bible and they're gonna point to whatever they're gonna point to, and they're gonna put their finger on it, and it says, "We want to preserve life," just like Jesus did, and that applies to the death penalty as well. Look, you're a harsh, serial killer, but you could still be redeemed.
Well, let's put it this way. One is a harsh serial killer. Don't say you're
Well, right. One, say you're in jail. Right, say you're in jail. You're a harsh serial killer. You're about to get electrocuted. Priest comes in, absolves your sins so that you can go to heaven. The church believes in that doctrine. I'm more of a realist, saying, yes, it's important to preserve life. But if Jesus did the word, then Moses, and Jesus was a Jew, cannot over-trump the law. And in the law, if you believe in the Ten Commandments, an eye for an eye, then that should be controlling in every man's, daily activities. So yes, that would give justifications for a death penalty. That would also give justification to a woman has a right to do what God has given her the right to do is, number 1, have free will, and number 2, to make a choice. Now, do I like abortion? No. Do I want to kill anyone? No. Would I, I'm old now, would I ever ask my wife, and she can't, we're all in our 40s, would I ever ask my wife or some girl that I fooled around with, say, and I don't fool around with my wife, but if I did, to go have an abortion? No. It's her choice. Now, there's a difference between pro-choice and pro-life. Pro-choice, you can decide what you want to do with your body. I think that's the right thing to do. Pro-life is somebody telling me I have to do what they want me to do with their body. It's a sort of authoritarianism, no different than, saying, a Stalinistic dictatorship in my mind. So yes, God has given you a free will, but I think you have a choice what to do with that free will. And that's something the church can't tell you what to do.
Nice. Hey, listen, just talking to a progressive Catholic, and I used to think that the expression was in itself an oxymoron. Meeting you and getting to know that you should have been Pope, for crying out. They should make you Pope.
Well, you know what?
Religion should have nothing to do with it. It should be common sense, what helps the people. And I think, like we talked about once, you make a difference from the inside. That's equally as effective as protesting from the outside. But it takes a combination of folks who can look in and say it's bad, but can be on the inside and look out and say it's bad. Do you have any hope? We talked off the air a little. You don't see much progression going on. Do you have any hope for the future of the Catholic Church, or
I
should
do.
they liquidate? And what would happen if they did liquidate? Would there be enough money to feed the poor and educate the curious, and maybe throw some rubbers to Africa to stop AIDS? And I don't know. What would be the ramifications of liquidation as you see it?
Well, first of all, I like the current Pope. Again, he's the first American Pope in the history of the Catholic Church. He comes from Argentina. He's been more progressive than any of the popes I've ever seen, maybe save Paul VI during the 1960s when the Church was going through their second Vatican phase, by which they were coming more into the 20th century. When it did the liberalism of the 60s, which you had the honor to see, which the Catholic Church even changed in the 1960s, had a backlash in the 80s under Reagan. A lot of the younger priests became ultra-conservative and followed Pope John Paul II, who was really conservative, and brought the Church back more into a medieval thought process. But this is what I want to say. Will the Church liquidate? No, and I'll tell you why. Throughout the Church's history, in 1054, the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches were one. So you had the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, the Romanian Orthodox. You had all these Orthodox branches of Christianity, and they held hands with the Catholic Church. But like anything else, the Catholic Church has to get into some kind of political broil or whatever they want to do. And they changed the code of what's called the Nicene Creed, which is their dedication to Jesus. It's a prayer. It's said at every Mass. And the Eastern Orthodox didn't like that and broke away from the Catholic Church. Now, what you have to understand at the time in 1054, Catholic priests were allowed to marry. So when they broke, and a couple of centuries later, Francis of Assisi in Italy walked the earth, and he was one of the first notable people with what's called the stigmata, which is the wounds that Jesus had. He had it on his hands and his head like he was nailed to a cross. He preached a level of celibacy and stuff like that for the church because priests, high priests, even the Pope were fathering bastard children, whereas the Eastern Orthodox never changed their doctrines. They always were able to get married or, father children or whatever. But here, priests were able to get married, but they were also cheating on their wives. So then the Catholic Church made a doctrine of celibacy. That was one thing. Now, the next thing, it's come up on the 500th year of
Not
Luther.
cheating on their wives, cheating on the Church. Am I correct?
Well, no, they were cheating on their wives. Priests were allowed to marry at the time. But, you have a congregation. You see a little cookie in the congregation. What do you do after church? I don't want to paint the picture on the air. I still have to maintain my level of, some kind of things to my people out there who follow me. Otherwise, forget it. I'll be no better than anyone else. Paint the picture in your mind. Now, 500 years ago, Luther, Catholic priest, he nailed 500 points on the German church. The church is selling indulgences, which means, look, you screwed up, Ralph. You cheated on your wife. Maybe you killed someone. We'll sell you an indulgent. We'll sell you for a price your way into heaven. That would have brought the church. That would have brought the church down itself in the 1500s. It didn't. Church saved itself, and of course, 17 years ago, the whole scandal with priests running around with children, whether it's a boy or a girl, is covered up. Cardinal Law should be in jail instead. He went to a retirement home for nuns down in Maryland, and they thought that was punishment enough to hear them whine all day. I don't know. I don't know. Should he be in jail? Of course. He covered it all up. But this is what I want to say. It will never liquidate. It will never liquidate because I think the bureaucracy is too strong. And the College of Cardinals are making too much money. But there are some good cardinals. I know Cardinal O'Connor in New York was one. Cardinal O'Malley up here in Boston is a Franciscan, again, Francis of Assisi, so Sir
Right.
Francis over there. He christened me when I became a Eucharistic minister when he was the bishop down here. He is pure. Very good guy. There's no scandals. They have nothing on him. He actually rooted out a lot of it up here in Boston. The church won't die. Its philosophy might. But I always say, bureaucracy is no different than a business. But if you have faith,
or government, and it's the unholy trinity, big business, government, and church, they're all the same. They combine with each other to mess with humanity in a way that's going to take us down the tubes. But before it does, we'll be back next week with more Giants baseball, past, present, and future. We do digress, Ian, and it's a pleasure to do so. For those of you who hung...
Last thing, this is what I want to say. Baseball has the Trinity right in it. Baseball's a religion, don't you think?
Well, no, it's a business
as well.
And
what else is it?
It could be 2 out of 3. It is definitely a religion for those who worship. And if you equate it, all the teams are just different pews. It's one big church of baseball. How about we call it a synagogue of baseball? Because you remember in the old days when you used to be a Yiddish boicha. Remember?
Yeah, I used to hold the Torah. They said I should have been a rabbi. My mother never sent me to rabbi at Hebrew school. I became somewhat of an atheist, went wild, and then I saw the light. But that's my own private journey.
Okay, well, that's to be respected, as a matter of fact. No matter what gets you through the night, it works. And you're doing great, Ian. Say hello to those 2 boys. You got twins.
I do have twins, and let me tell you, when I had them, it's coming up on their 10th birthday this November. I had jet black hair, jet black beard, and the next year, I was 50% gray.
Wow. I found a dark hair in my beard the other day. I didn't know what that was. So I know what you're going through. Let me ask you this: what do you pass on to your kids that was passed on to you?
You know something, Ralph? This is what I passed on to my kids, because not much was passed on to me. I grew up poor in Brooklyn, New York. My father and mother never worked. My father was an abusive father and never cared about education. And my mother could care less. And, he was a deadbeat daddy, never supported me. I did everything pretty much myself until I met my wife at 25. And that's what I do, the sense of family. Now, I speak to my mother today. We are close. But, it was a harsh time growing up in the 70s and 80s for me. But what I pass on to my kids is this: read. And they always see me reading. They see me constructing my book. They see a pile of books near me. And you know what they say to me, Ralph? Hey, Daddy, when you die, can I take over as co-host as Giants Baseball and have your show Genesis?
Why don't you bring them on as guests?
Because they're 9 years old.
Well, that's all right.
But they want to take that, so if I die within the next few years, you'll be talking to my heirs.
No, don't talk that way, Ian.
I'm just saying, Ralph. I said, you guys are ready to put me in the grave already so you can take over my show, because my shows are published at the library.
Ian, it's not just the show they're looking for; it's the money, Ian.
But the library, and I'm the talk of the schools because everyone listens to my show, and they had me in for a couple of baseball sessions to talk in school here. So the kids think that I'm no different than a newscaster on the radio. So they really listen to my shows when you publish it, and they hear it, and they just love it. So I think my legacy is for them to learn as much as possible in life and do what the hell you want to do with this life without anyone telling you what to do.
That's beautiful. Love chatting with you, my friend, and we'll do it again very soon. Next week, as a matter of fact, as Al Blumpkin would say, same station, same bat channel, same station. What would he say? Al, thanks for being a maven out there. I hope you enjoyed this one. And Ian, terrific. Thank you again.
All right.
If you're listening out there, everybody, keep on keeping on, and we'll see you soon. Adios, everybody.
Take care, Ralph.
Adios.